I aimed for that, and yeah, crazy. I stabbed him with a narwhal tusk.
Quite well know Darren as the narwhal tusks man. He's a genuinely heroic figure who tackled a terrorist on London Bridge in November 2019, armed with the first thing that came to hand, the tusks he'd managed to grab off the wall of the Fishmongers Hall, where he'd been at a conference hosted by Learning Together, a prison rehabilitation organisation. The terrorist, Usman Khan, was wearing a fake suicide vest and had already killed 25-year-old Jack Merritt and 23-year-old Saskia Jones. Khan was eventually shot dead by the police.
Coming into London, I now live in Northampton, but coming into London is always a treat for me. But it does still, to this day, create a bit of an involuntary reaction. So I've got some drugs that I take for anxiety and social anxiety, which I never used to have before, but it's manageable. And yeah, I just love the vibrancy of the area, the Borough Market. It's just a wonderful area to come to.
Yeah, it is actually a genuinely joyful part of the city, and I'm really glad that you still have the strength to feel that way about it, to be honest. We are going to talk in some detail about your fantastic prisoner rehabilitation work, but just so people have an idea of how remarkable it is actually that you're so committed to that cause, do you mind just taking us through some of the points of that day? The conference itself was at the Fishmongers Hall, not very far from where we are now, and it was for people who'd just come out of prison and for interested graduates of Cambridge. Is that correct?
So it was a joint project, a project that was ahead of its time. It brought current prisoners together with students from Cambridge Criminology to study together, to do degrees, criminology degrees, I believe, together, which was really incredible because it meant that it pulled down those barriers between students and people in prison. You couldn't get more opposite sides of society. And yet in that classroom, they were all students. And what was really remarkable about that program was that both sides helped each other and learned from each other, because there's stories that no matter how good your degree is, you'll never learn the truth of what it's like in prison. But here they were sat next to people who were living that truth. And I think it was a wonderful, wonderful initiative. I wish it could have continued, but there was unfortunately a few safeguards and risk assessments fell through, and it's a real pity, a tragic end to that story and that program.
The terrorist, we don't need to mention his name again, but the terrorist on that day had recently got out of prison, hadn't he? That's how he was able to be there.
Yeah, so I believe he was out for about a year before, and he had engaged in the program, and he did really well whilst on the program. I think the problem was he then went into a small flat on his own, and as our system of protecting the public, we ensure that people who present a risk, we remove them from those other risk influences. So we removed him from his social group. He tried apparently like hundreds of times to get jobs. He was rejected from all jobs. So he had nothing left to live for. He had nothing. And if we remove all those things from people in a way of controlling, we need to fill it with something. And unfortunately, he never had the same oversight. He never had anything else to do. And so his existence became quite a miserable one in what I've heard. And that's a really dangerous thing. When you have someone who's got nothing left to live for, you're not giving them hope, no purpose. And unfortunately, we saw the outcome of that.
Now, your behaviour on that day, can you just take us through how the affair unfolded and whether what you did was entirely instinctive?
I've reflected on this quite a bit, especially in the early months. But so on the day, it was a beautiful conference hall. I got there early, so I surveyed the place. I even took videos. So I was really early. I even took a photo inside the hall, and the one person sat down there was the terrorist perpetrator. I never knew that at the time I took a photo. But I also took of the entrance area, and I knew it really well because I'd really admired it. And so then we had a break later on the day. There were sessions going on, and then there was a break. And I always leave it to the end to go to the loo because I don't want to rush against people and whatever. So I was one of the last to go into the loo, and then the session started again. And we started the session, but the terrorist hadn't returned back to the room, so Jack went out to go and find him.
That's your friend Jack.
So Jack married. I hadn't met Jack before the day. I've heard a lot about him, and I've been very fortunate to meet his family. But yeah, he was part of the Learning Together program. He was a Cambridge law graduate, remarkable young man who saw the potential in people and wanted to see them as human beings and give them a chance. So he went down to go and look for the missing person, and went into the bathroom, and unfortunately that's where that individual came out and attacked Jack, and then came out of the bathroom and attacked Saskia as well. We were in the hall upstairs, about 110 people, and we heard the scuffling and shouts downstairs. So people were being told to stay in the room and keep calm. But I stood up, I don't know if instinctively, it sounded like people were in real distress. So I stood up the same time as Steve Gallant, actually, who was on his first day of day release in 14 years. I hadn't met him before either, but we stood up simultaneously, ran across the hall, and started going down the stairs. Now, it's a double staircase, grand staircase, beautiful. He ran down the right, and I started running down the left. And as I was running down the left, another woman was running up the stairs, but really petrified, and she was going, "Oh my God, oh my God." So because of her response, I looked over the balcony, and I'd seen Saskia had fallen, and she was wounded. So straight away, with the noises going on, I knew it was quite a serious situation. And I was actually going to run into where we'd just been served lunch, and they'd had food served out there, fish pie at Fishmonger's Hall. And I was going to grab a lid of the Bay Marines from the dish serving, and a ladle, a spoon, as makeshift weapons. But as I was going towards there, I glanced to my left, and down this dimly lit hall were these 2-meter long narwhal tusks. So I changed my plan and went and grabbed the one on the left, and pulled it out of its golden hilt, and ran down the stairs with it, past Saskia, who was still on the stairs, now receiving care from a prison officer, Adam. And then I saw Steve, who'd run down with me, and he was combating someone by the door to the main entrance. I couldn't see what it was, and I went to his side with the long narwhal tusk, kind of using it in a spear-like position. And as I go around the door, I see this individual fully clothed in black, heavy-set brow, black cap on, heavy jacket, and he's got 2 8-inch knives strapped to his hands. Behind him was a young lady who was on the floor she was lying in the recovery position, and in a lot of blood, but lying really still. And that was the first moment when I really appreciated the severity of the situation. So then what happened was I held the narwhal tusk at the attacker's belly, just holding him at bay, not attacking him, but just keeping him at bay. And I think he got quite startled by this, and he stopped kind of attacking towards Steve, who was using a mahogany chair to defend himself. And he turned to me, and he kind of looked down quizzically at the narwhal tusk, because it's quite a strange object, to be fair. And then he looked back at me, and he almost pleaded with me and saying that he's not there for me, he's waiting for the police. And then when he said that, a lady behind who was giving care to Saskia said, "Oh my God, he's got a bomb." And that's when he looked down and he said, "And I've got a bomb." And that's quite a moment. You don't really know how to deal with it. And my mind started reeling, because directly above 110 people in the conference room, he's just said, when the police arrive, to me, that's when he's going to blow this thing. And so I was trying to contemplate what to do, and I didn't know what to do. I hadn't made my mind up. And this is how I know that it wasn't just instinct, because I was contemplating the options. They were going really fast through my head. And
I was going to say, this is a matter of nanoseconds, isn't it, really?
Yeah, but what I've realized, I never noticed at the time or realized at the time, is that it really does go like those Spider-Man movies or The Matrix or whatever. Time slows down massively, because I thought all of this took a lot more time. I've seen the video on the bridge, And I thought that was about a 20, 30-second interaction I had with him. But I've seen the video and it's like 2 seconds. Things slow down massively. And what was really weird was my other senses shut off to anything except for what was happening. So all I could hear was his voice or anyone referring to stuff directly relevant. So like the siren was going off and I couldn't even hear that was going off. My brain shut that out totally. So then I'm contemplating what to do now. This man's in front of me. There's a woman just behind who I thought was either dead or dying. And I knew that we needed to get to her to offer her some assistance because Saskia behind was getting assistance. So I was thinking we need to move him away so that people can get to her, but we can't threaten him because he'll blow up the It was a really chaotic thing. And the thing that broke my thought pattern was then Steve threw this mahogany chair, which glanced off Khan's shoulder and went to the back. And now Steve stood right next to me, but he's unarmed. And so the attacker starts going towards Steve. And so Steve looks up quizzically at me, and I had to change my thought pattern from how do I prevent this to how do I help the man next to me. So that's when I look at Steve. I keep the tip pointed towards the attacker's belly, and I pass over the narwhal tusk. And Steve looks at me, and he grabs it. But then I'm in a situation where I'm even closer than you and I are now to this guy with 8-inch knives, and I'm thinking I'm not helpful now. So I ran back up past Saskia, who's getting care still, up the stairs to get the second narwhal tusk. And as I'm getting that, everyone's coming out of that exact door from the entrance, from the conference hall above, and they're all shocked and startled. And a work colleague comes to me and she starts grabbing my arm, saying, "Don't go, don't go." And I was grabbing the second narwhal tusk, and I just pushed her to the wall with my other hand. And apparently I heard from another work colleague that I said something like, "I'm not having this, I won't let him hurt anyone else," or something like that. I can't recall saying that. But I slowly took the next. Now, these are 2-meter long things, and I could tell they were quite brittle. And the second one didn't come out of the hilt as easily. It felt like it was a few millimeters too long. And I was frustrated in how long it was taking me to get that out. And as I managed to get it out. And as I turn around, I see another girl who sat on a chair who's had her arm sliced, and she's in a white shirt. So I now understand why everyone upstairs is in shock, because they don't know what's going on. I run back down again past Saskia again, and I get down to that entrance hall where we had confronted the attacker, and there was shattered narwhal tusk all over the floor. So I didn't know what had happened to Steve, and I'm thinking, oh my gosh, what's going on? But I see a foot go out the front door. So I start running to the front door, and people are shouting, lock the door, lock the door. But the doorman, I'm shouting, open the door. So the doorman kindly opens the door for me, and I was very conscious about the tip of this narwhal tusk and managed to get it through the door without breaking off the tip or anything like that. I get outside onto the top stairs by Fishmonger's Hall, and this is where it's really interesting because I just get tunnel vision, and all I can see is the terrorist running, and that's all I can focus on. And I see him, and then I see him running towards crowds of people. And like a shoal of fish, they're all bunching up because they're running onto London Bridge against other people who are walking in the other direction. And it becomes really bunched, and they start spilling into the road. And then there's a bus that swerves, and all chaos. And that was my moment. I was like, I have to stop him because, well, he's got this bomb. He's waiting for the police. If the police arrive, he's going to blow this up. So I decide to just chase him down the street. As I get down the stairs by Fishmonger's Hall, I get startled by this fire extinguisher that goes off because I'm in tunnel vision. I don't even see John or Steve. And it startles me, and I see, and there's this guy unwieldily holding this fire extinguisher, which was quite comical if I look back at it now. And I see Steve on the other side, but they were kind of grounded in their position. I think they didn't know what to do. So I run past them at full speed. And I think they're still there, and I didn't know that they were following me. As I approach the attacker, he's still running away from me. He can't catch up with any of the public that are running away, so he turns around and faces me, and he sees me running at him. So then he starts running towards me again, and he lifts both knives up. And this is where I know it goes really slow motion because he's running at me, I'm running at him full pace with this 2 meter long thing. He's got these padded jackets covering the suicide belt, and he's quite protected. But because he lifts up both knives to come and attack me, there's about a centimeter of flesh that exposes on his left-hand side. And so I aim for that, and yeah, crazy. I stabbed him with a narwhal tusk. And he didn't seem to react so much. He did double over from the impact, but he didn't seem to react so much. But then when I pulled it out, he kind of doubled over again. And so I pulled it out, ready to steady myself for a second attack from him. But that didn't happen. He didn't attack me because at that time, like it had been choreographed, John Crilly comes and sprays the fire extinguisher towards him. But because there's quite a strong wind coming over the bridge, it perfectly disguises Steve Gallant running down the outside.
Right.
The timing is incredible because as I pull out that narwhal tusk, the attacker buckles over. So he's leaning forward, but he's got the 2 8-inch knives still in his hands. And because of that fire extinguisher disguising Steve, he's now just behind his shoulder and pulls him off balance. And that's when I do a funny wobble because I don't expect the backup. And I jump on his back and outstretch his arms.